Welcome to this special edition of Njenje Media TV, State of the Nation, where we engage in critical conversations that shape the future of Nigeria. Today, we have with us a distinguished guest, a renowned political analyst, lawyer, activist, and public affairs commentator, Professor Chris Nwaokobia Jnr. Professor, once more, you're welcome to Njenje Media TV.
It's my pleasure to be on, Njenje.
Okay, it's been a long time we cooked something on this platform. Today we are on it. Let me fire the first salvo here. Yesterday marked, it's actually a very interesting day, because yesterday marked exactly 2 years that INEC declared that election in Abuja. Obviously, you and I were in Abuja, and we had intense conversation as to what the future holds for Nigeria. Reflecting back now, 2 years down the line, what do you think has happened to Nigeria since that decision was made?
Let me say clearly, Njenje, that that election remains a question mark on our collective conscience, both as a people, as a democracy, and as a nation seeking answers to so many questions. Don't forget that democracy, as it were, it was defined by Abraham Lincoln as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, which obviously means that the basis and the background for democratic engagement is popular choice, the people. And then, very importantly, if you and I agree that the people are the summum bonum in the democratic experience, then the second leg is the electoral process. It is not democracy when the electoral process is manipulated. It is not democracy when the electoral process is shortchanged against popular choices. It is not democracy when the choice of the people is stolen. And apart from the ruling party, most Nigerians agree that what happened in 2023 February was a charade. That is why collectively Nigerians are asking for electoral reforms. That is why Nigerians are asking for, and that was one of the major interventions I had today in a sister station of yours, where I said that we can only effectively pursue electoral reforms and make them yield result when the umpire appears to the people as free, fair, and credible. Mahmoud Yakub is stained. His hands are stained with oil. You cannot effectively trust him with the electoral process. Because since 2023, when he conducted that presidential election that is largely flawed, every election that he has conducted appears to be flawed. So Nigerians are saying that progressively, he has lost their trust. Nigerians are increasingly, if you observe what happens everywhere, that voter apathy is the definition of the game. Nigerians are sitting back at home, and the question now is, if we vote, what about the trust and the confidence of the man who counts the votes? And so 3 years, 2 full years down the line, what is fundamentally important is the challenge by the civil society organization, the media, the Nigerian Bar Association, and several other interest groups. The effort at ensuring that we have electoral reforms, such that one fundamental thing that must happen is the use of technology in defining our elections. You don't have an IREV and you can't use it. You don't have technology so paid for and you can use it to ascertain and encourage free, fair, and transparent polls. So, as you and I talk, Njenje, what is very important and what is very trite is that the masses of our people must collectively, along with a truly progressive political class, a truly progressive political class, ask for electoral reforms that will be far-reaching, ask for electoral reforms such that technology will be effectively appropriated, so that technology will be properly deployed into ensuring that the electoral process is free, fair, and transparent. And then the second leg to it is the fact that we must ensure that our recruitment process is reworked, where only those whose reason for being in politics is for the common good emerge as party representatives and emerge as candidates in elections, and then we'll be left with choices that are credible, choices that have capacity and competency. And that way we're able to begin the journey to truly making our country great again.
Now, I mean, I appreciate your input here. You mentioned in your submission that you know, one of those things that ought to you know, be taken care of is the use of technology. If I ask you now, I mean, are there like 3 key cardinal areas you believe that for us to have a better election in 2027, these areas needs to be addressed by INEC?
Yeah, fundamentally, the first one is technology for accreditation of voters and votes. Technology must be deployed in collation processes. Results must be collated from the ward levels, from the ward and the unit levels. This tendency of saying, oh, we're taking the collation to local government centers and all that should be thrown away. If America has about over 300, close to 400 million people, and within a space of about 24, 48 hours, they are able to conduct and conclude elections, deploying technology, then we must emulate that which is good and try it. And deploy technology. You find out that with technology, you have less human errors. You find out that with technology, it becomes almost impossible for vote buyers to determine the process, because essentially, once the results are counted at the various units, they're loaded up to the IRF, and the IRF is no longer seen as what any electoral officials can do away with. The law, which of course we're pushing at the National Assembly, is that election results, once uploaded on the IRF, should be deemed consistent with the people's wish and deemed authentic. And then the third one, which is very important, is the fact that all petitions arising from elections must be dealt with before the swearing in of any candidate, of any winner. And you know, that's what happens in Kenya and several other countries. You know, what we must do is ensure that nobody sits at the hallowed chamber or sits in the executive office deploying the people's resources to compromise the judicial process. If you win an election, if you lose an election and you want to petition the winner, both of you must stay out of the office until the matters in court are dealt with. And that's the way to go. You know, save and except that is done, you will see people say, oh, I have won, go to court. Nobody should be the beneficiary of electoral malfeasance or larceny until the court says, oh, Mr. A is the winner or Mr. B is the loser. That's what we must do going forward.
In the case of Nigeria, we have a window of 90 days. And these 90 days, what you're saying is that these decisions has to be decided, you know, these are court decisions, has to be done within that window of 90 days.
That's right.
Yeah, but there are also other people who argue that, well, why must Nigeria be the country that changes electoral or that engages in electoral reform every 4 years? So what I mean, people argue that even with what we have, if we have people who are serious, we can still get a perfect election. You know, the 1993 election that is being acclaimed as the freest election, there was no IREV, there was no, but yet the election went on smoothly and a clear winner emerged. So is it that it is about technology or new laws, or that this is about a people? What do you think?
Your question raises a lot of points that must be addressed. But the first thing to note is that it has to do with the people. That's the first thing to note. The political operators that we have today are driven by what I call the me, myself, and I tendencies, much more than what we had before now. Parties do not align with manifestos and ideals that puts the people first. It's about me, myself first. It's about individualism and individualistic tendencies. And so, what must we do? Continue to reel in the past or try to improve the democratic process, create better checks and balances? I think the answer is to improve on the process. In 1993, when we had June 12th, there was adjudged the freest and the fairest election in our historicity. We had two major candidates, and we didn't have a plethora of candidates at the presidential level. And the campaign was so electrifying that at some point, Nigerians knew people had made their choices as to who they wanted to vote. Now the odds are different. We have a multi-party democracy, and we have a democratic process that is largely flawed because the candidates and the parties are almost always lacking in ideology. And so going forward, how must we protect the electoral process? Going forward, it does appear that the best way to handle and improve on the electoral process is to have good laws that will compel the umpires to do right. I would say, Njenje, that if we had electoral umpires whose conscience is guarded rightly, if we had electoral umpires who believe in the moral and who believe in the judgment of history, we will need to review our laws every 4 years. But now we have a situation on hand that there must be a solution to it. And we are asking once and for all that since the highly progressive world have begun to deploy technology in adjudging electoral contestation, Nigerians must improve and ensure that that obtains. And let me give you an instance. In Kenya presently, what obtains is that from the moment election results are announced, the electoral umpire provides all the parties with the details and the data of the election. So much so that if you're ready, the very next day after the results have been announced, you can go to court with electoral umpire providing you with all the materials. So what is important here is, if we create a situation where someone who says, I'll rig the election, go to court, understands that he cannot get to power until the electoral issues are determined by the courts, the temptation, the tendency, the proclivity to go manipulate results becomes harder. He sits back to say, what if I spend all my money buying votes and at the end of the day, the court throws away my victory? I've lost all because I can't even sit in the office one day to try to recoup the monies I spent. So what is important going forward is not to reel over the past that was perfect, but build a model that will be better. And so I'm insisting, along with the civil society, that we build a model that is better than what we had in 1993. And in St. Augustine's prognosis, it says laws define the values and the morality of every society. If we have sane laws, perhaps Mahmoud Yakub wouldn't have been able to tell us that we should wait until he announces his result, because we've seen the results on the IRF. So we need laws that will make it imperative for INEC to announce results displayed on the IRF. And that way, we'll be able to deal largely with electoral subterfuge, electoral larceny, and outrightly reduce the temptation and the tendency to subvert the will of the people.
Thank you very much, Prof. One will wish that one day we would be in a position like the Germans did last week. The election that was conducted in Germany, where the CDU won that election, and that election result was called in 8 hours after the close of casting of votes.
That's right.
You know, so, and for us, we'll spend so many days, and many are now argue that those days are spent to rewrite the results. But hey, that's what it is. And thank you for your effort and input in driving the narrative that these electoral reforms must happen before the next election. Now, let me take you quickly to the next question I have for you here. That is on the book written by IBB and its controversy. Obviously, you are aware that the former military president Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida's new book is generating a storm of reactions. What key issues in that book do you find most troubling? And do you think this is an attempt to rewrite history that we all know?
Clearly, you know what is interesting about history is the fact that if you don't learn from history, you relive it. Tragically and unfortunately, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida Jnr. refused to learn from history, and he's reliving history. He was called Maradona. He was called the Igbo genius. And very unfortunately, at 83, he's still trying to play the Maradona, and he's still trying to be the Igbo genius. A poor image making effort. That's what I call that book. You know, you don't come to try to weave a veil over the people. You don't come to, if you felt genuinely sorry and remorseful about the annulment of June 12th, all you need to do is come say sorry and then identify the families that lost lives and limbs and make some atonement. Help them return to life. Help them come off the pain of what he cost our country in 1993. Had he not failed, we would never have had the 5 years of Abacha, the 5 draconic years of Abacha. Had he not failed to hand over power to Abiola, we perhaps would still have Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 9 here. Had he not failed to hand over power to the man who won the June 12th election, we perhaps would still have had the young boys who were mowed down by Abacha's men in the Ikorodu Road. Had he not failed in following through with the democratic process that he began, we perhaps would still have had some semblance of genuine democracy, because what would have happened is that successive elections after June 12 would have been freer and much more credible. But you know, with what IBB did in 1992, so many things went wrong. So many things have happened. The era of election malfeasance, the era of vote buying, the era of killing for power and killing for votes came after that invidious and demonic annulment of elections. And you know, I was a young man then, I was about 21, and I was one of the coordinators of the June 12 campaign. Njenje, if I tell you what we saw on Ikorodu Road, if I tell you what Abacha's guns and goons did to our young brothers and sisters on Ikorodu Road, if I tell you the aftermath, you remember the Oswa Abiola and several other dislocating situations that came up of the June 12 trauma. And then to come back 32 years after, to write a book where proudly you were telling us that you annulled it because you were scared of Abacha and some of the northern traditional rulers. Defines cowardice in absolute terms. He was shameless in admitting that he wasn't truly a general, he was a general by title. He was shameless in taking absolute responsibility. He went calling names. He was shameless in understanding that the buck stops at his table. And then the second leg, that book tried to romanticize the Igbo emotions by claiming or trying to put an end to the folk power, the falsehood about 1966 15th January coup as an Igbo coup. We always knew, Nigerians know, but for those who are mischievous, whose motive was to fan the embers of hate against the Igbos to political gain. Apart from those people, Nigerians have always known. I think it was Ademoyega or Ademolegu who wrote The Five Majors Why We Struck.
Ademoyega, yeah.
And clearly in that book, he said in no uncertain terms that the plotters were an agglomeration of Nigerians from different ethnicities. Well, amongst the leaders, we had Igbos, we had Yorubas, we had Urobos, we had Isokos, we had men from different parts of the country were involved. And so it was against the Igbos to claim that that coup was an Igbo coup. We knew, you know. So I think that in his typical Maradonic manner, he tried to dance around that so as to get some Igbo acclaim, so as to get some thumbs up from Ndibo. But he has failed because, you see, no matter how fast lines travel, no matter how fast the weaves and the winds of falsehood is, ultimately, truth will overcome. Truth will outpace it. Truth will prevail. You know, interestingly, we live in a world that one ultimate mighty hand directs. Our planet is God's planet, and God is just. You know, when those who perhaps met with him in Mina and decided to come up with that memoir, always proudly calling him the Maradona, thought that 32 years after, they will dribble the nation. I'm sure that they didn't expect the kind of boomerang, the kind of regulatory effect. As I talk to you, on account of the argument that I brought beyond the June 12 issue, don't forget that IBB was never elected president. So in actuality, he was never president. And so to attempt to endow a presidential library is an anathema. It's against the law. And what lessons is he trying to teach the people? That coups and putches is legitimate or right? That coups and putches gives you presidential powers? What is he trying to teach the people? And I discovered this morning, after I put out that argument a few days ago, that Femi Falana and Leonard Silk and some other lawyers are preparing to go to court to argue along that line. Njenje, I'm proud to say with all sense of humility that argument, I've had people call me and say to me, Prof, how do you reason? We never thought of it as such. I said, but it's clear. Those who endowed the concept of presidential libraries began in the United States of America, and almost every American president has endowed a library. And the reason is because they elected representatives of the people to govern. And when they build a library, people are more inclined to find out the details and the whys of their governance in America. Nobody voted for Ibrahim Madawas Babangida in 1985. Nobody voted for him to be president, so in actuality, he was never president. And to want to build a presidential library as a coupist who got to power through a military purge is wrong, and we will resist it. Then, very importantly, is the issues about how he approved the execution of someone who allegedly was his best man at his wedding. And here we mean Maman Vasa. You know, it takes a man who absolutely is cowardly and jealous to do, because we have seen some generals who were part of the Armed Forces Ruling Council, like Don Kadbali, who clearly said that Don Kadbali was the victim, that Maman Vasa was the victim of hate and jealousy. You know, and to try to, and then he tried to escape taking responsibility for the murder of journalist Delegiwa. But that parcel bomb, which was novel in our history and historicity, was delivered to Delegiwa whilst he was president, where he was a military despot. I think I'm more comfortable with using those words, you know. And as I talk to you, Njenje, it is important that people tell IBB and his likes that Nigerians and the young generation of thinkers that we have on our socio-political horizon are not cowardly, they are not forgetful. And then I always have told people who I interact with politically that when you politic, look back, and then you find out that we have a generation of Nigerians who are internet savvy, who have the vehicle of communication in their hands. And this vehicle of communication is not only a telephone, but a key to unlocking knowledge. And these young boys and young girls will just Google check you. And they will fact check you and tell you to stop lying to them. I think that those who advise IBB and his likes have not come to terms with this reality. A few years ago, I met one of the leaders of our country, and I said to him, in dealing with this Gen Z generation, we're dealing with people who apparently know just about everything. And he looked at me and said, really? I said, yes. If you were to ask my daughter, and then my daughter was around, I said, if you were to ask my daughter a question, there's just about no question that she can answer. And he said, no, Prof, you're overstating the obvious. I said, just give them 2 minutes. And they will answer. And he said, how do you mean? I said, ask her any question. So long as she has the phone on her hands, in her hands, she will tell you the answer. That's the generation we're dealing with. It's not that generation that IBB played with 32 years ago. We're dealing with a generation that will subject everything, just about everything, to critical, empirical, and forensic analysis. And so going forward, that is why I always advise our political players on our political turf to be careful, resolute, consummate, and competent, because you don't pull a wool through the faces and the eyes of these Nigerian young people. And you know, that's why I also have hope for 2027, Njenje. I haven't lost hope in Nigeria. With what I saw these young people do in 2022 and 2023, how they emerged, like the political operators would say, from 2-3 people tweeting in a room to a monstrous political movement, then imagine what will happen between now and 2027. Every so often, we politic and talk. So many of them have been asking questions, where, what party, they can't wait anymore. They have become the conscience of our nation. They have become a strong and stringent question mark on our collective conscience. They have become forces of good, not just political tools. And so going forward, Njenje, I believe that IBB did not seek proper counsel in putting that messy memoir out. he did not seek proper advice and critical thought in thinking that he could endow a presidential library. And unfortunately, if you are surrounded by sycophants, court jesters, praise singers, you may never truly have people who put you right. I have told, and I'm saying it through this your medium, political operators and leaders to go learn from the leadership secrets of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln had one ferocious critic, one strong voice against not only his person, his politics, and his messages. And that critic of his became so virulent, painful, and inconveniencing. And his name was Stanton. He mocked his physical look, mocked his speech making, mocked and criticized everything about Lincoln. But you know what? When America was faced with the throes of conflict and the war, Abraham Lincoln sent for Stanton. And according to Stanton, he said he was scared for his life. What again have I done? And what does he want to do with me? And when he met Stanton, he said he will be my confidential secretary and secretary of war. Stanton looked at him and said, so you couldn't find any other person? He said, no, you're the only one who can tell me how ugly I look or how badly I have behaved. So you're going to work with me as my closest man. I need a man who can tell me when I'm wrong or when I'm right. That is one deep thing that is lacking in leadership in Nigeria. And you know what? When Stanton took over the job, and through their working together, the years of the working together, when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, one of the greatest tribute that was ever written for, by, and on behalf of Lincoln and for Lincoln, every tribute, you know, the best of the tributes, was the one written by Stanton. And it was captioned, now he belongs to the ages. He found a leader who was beyond banal egos and pride. He found a leader who could listen to his fiercest critic. If IBB had people around him who could tell him the truth and tell him exactly what it is, if our leaders surround themselves with critics and advisors who will tell them exactly how to govern and tell them where they have gone wrong, we'll have a better republic on our hands. So IBB's memoir came out for a messy work, a poor work in image making, and perhaps his karma has come so close because he thought that he could dribble the people again.
Well,
perhaps his judgment is here with him because he thought that he could continue the act of falsehood and perfidy. And I tell you, for my Igbo brothers who were overexcited that a liar, a dribbler, a man who does not hold any respect for truth, had told the world that the 1966 January 15th coup was not an Igbo coup. Only those who do not know the best of history will be excited about that. I don't need, my late father would say, you don't need a thief in the backyard to tell you how to protect your yam or how to keep the goat away. You need wisdom to handle certain things. And so I don't need an IBB to tell me that the 1996 coup, maybe at this leadership may have had one or two more Igbos. The man who actually foiled the coup, those who prevented the success of the coup were Igbos too. And so, and the man who had the leaders of that plot in prison was an Igbo man. So you don't tell me that because people over the past 54 years or so have decided to prey on the sentiments of a nation, that because people have tried to profiteer from our fault lines, marginalize a people because they are scared of their ability to think and their industry, lie against the people because you think, quote unquote, they know too much. And so you decide to label them as haters and coupists. That will stand, you know. Falsehood has never defeated truth. So I think that IBB goofed, his advisors and minders goofed. And I think that if the easiest way to undo that harm is to come out publicly to apologize to Nigerians for the many wrongs that he had committed. And then instead of a presidential library, set up an NGO to help restore the many victims of the June 12th problem to better living, to better life. That's what he needs, not a book full of falsehood and lies.
Okay. Prof, would you quickly respond to this? Now, when we talk about justice for the victims of June 12th, many believe that IBB should formally apologize and pay restitution. Now, keyword here, restitution, to victims of the June 12, 1993 election that was annulled. Do you think this is a realistic demand? And what would such a gesture mean for national reconciliation? Because people are saying, rather than build this, library, presidential library, why don't you use for some of those funds? There are people who are still living and still bearing the scars of the June 12, 1993 annulled election. Your thought, Prof.
Let me say clearly that I'm on all fours with that position. As I talk to you, I'm not a money bag, but one very close friend of mine, Richard Ogunderu, who led the 1994 Nigerian Airways plane hijack, calling for the de-annulment, the revalidation of June 12, is largely under my care. I take care of his medicals. I support him almost weekly with funds. These young boys, they were 4 in all, were imprisoned in the Nigerian Republic for almost 10 years. And they came back. Nobody has tried to help them out. Nobody has tried to really rehabilitate them. These are fallouts from June 12. Instead of going to endow a library that he has no legitimate right to, he can divert the funds to restitution, to helping get back the families, starting from the MK Abiola family, because that caused a major collapse of his businesses. Help get the family back together, put the funds into an endowment fund for families that lost lives, young boys and young girls who lost limbs, and those who lost their earnings. Remember the Osho Abiola? It was all part of the group. There were people who left Lagos, who left some of the cities in the north, thinking that that was going to be the beginning of a national calamity and catastrophe in the mode of a civil war. And in running away from these cities, some died in car accidents, some lost homes, some lost. There are a lot of them. It's not difficult to document and collate. What IBB truly needs is to genuinely apologize and try to create an endowment fund for these people. Reality, that's what you call true national reconciliation, and not to continue to lie. It is demeaning for a general to say that because he was scared that Abacha was going to kill him, they are not June 12. It's demeaning. It's a shameless act of cowardice. And I think that what he truly needs to do in the twilight of his career is to ensure that he puts resources and funds into trying to help the families that lost lives, lost their means of livelihood and the lives back to better living conditions. If he does that, so many of us will genuinely forgive him. If he does that, so many of us will say, now you can speak to us about the issues of nation. Until he does that, he lacks the moral nexus to tell us that democracy, Nigeria survived and democracy is moving. He lacks the moral nexus to tell us about nation building and about togetherness. He lacks the moral nexus to tell us about unity and about the way to go. So I think that these are the fundamental issues. He must atone, he must restitute, and he must help those that his actions got out of comfort, back to comfort.
So, Prof, thank you very much for that. You know, we'll round up now, but before I let you go, I have this final question for you, which is on the state of the Nigerian nation today. Given the economic hardship, insecurity, disillusionment in the country, do you think Nigeria is at risk of greater instability? If you do think so, what steps must be taken to restore faith in governance and national unity?
Now, let me say clearly that the present anomaly, the present pain, the present poverty is like a sword of Damocles. It swings both ways. It could actually perhaps lead to a truly people's revolution. I'm not talking, when I say truly people's revolution, I'm not talking about violence and murder everywhere. I'm talking about the people realizing that the Nigerian state is a state of tools, the noble rich, the political class, and us. It is a way to making the people realize that the political operators are perhaps living in opulence and profligacy, and the other wrong of the divide, the people are the victims of hunger, and that consistently, rather than address the issues, the political class is telling us to tighten our seatbelts, to tighten our belts. And you don't tell a man who has nothing to eat to tighten his belts. So there's a disconnect. They're making budgets and increasing their individual emoluments. They're making budgets and increasing recurrent expenditure. They're building houses and buying cars, whereas the people are descending further into poverty, according to the statistics that we have. So when you have a nation faced with these realities, you know, it was Mandela that said a long time ago that when this middle class in every society is largely eroded, then that society is in big trouble. And so I am praying that leadership understands this reality. But very importantly, like I said, it's a two-way coin. It is also propelling and compelling the political class, that is those who are outside of power, to attempt to coalesce, to attempt to unite, to attempt to chart a new course where God will in power be taken from the APC in 2027. So that's a beautiful side of it. Because in the build up to 2027, if this poverty, hunger, and despondency continues, the likelihood of people not listening to the ruling party is higher. They will have to campaign against poverty, against the dislocation of the masses, against want and despondency. And that becomes an uphill task. So I think that largely what we have on our hands, it's a bit encouraging, because we'll be compelled to build a new political class. We'll be compelled to unite rather than agonize. We'll be compelled to strategize, to see that we have a new order come 2027. And maybe as a way of reacting to these realities, the political class, by that I mean those who are in power today, would perhaps decide to come down from their high horses and admit that their economic policies are not working. Would decide to retune, rejig, and refix what they have proudly lied about. Because you remember that my opening write-up this year, which I captioned Let's get the job done, folks. In that piece, I said clearly that what we're going to have in 2025 is going to be a year of propaganda, half-truths and falsehood. And that's what you have everywhere. They are compromising the media to see lights where there are no beams. They are compromising the media to see rays of light where you have pitch darkness. They are compromising the public space to see light at the end of a tunnel where there is no ray of light. And I tell you, we are also committed to making the people see the true situation. We're also committed to ensuring that a spade is called by its name. We're also committed to ensuring that truth prevails over falsehood, love prevails over hate, and God on the throne, the masses of our people will have the last laugh. God on the throne, truth will prevail. And Njenje, I want to, maybe as we wind down, bring to your kind notice that great writer, that great poet who wrote a work that he captioned this present crisis. And when he wrote, it was deeply innovative, deeply revealing. He said, and I quote, "Truth forever on the scaffold, falsehood forever on the throne. That same truth on the scaffold sways the future. For behind the dim, the darkness unknown, standeth God behind the shadows, keeping watch above his own." I tell you, James Rowell will stay true. And the truth that is put out in that poem, The Present Crisis, will come true in our country. Because you see, hunger, according to Karl Marx, would always work for either a conscious mass to turn their poverty around, or the dictators to keep the people in deeper darkness. But I think that Nigerians are at that point where, look at it, Nigerians are speaking out and speaking boldly now. Young boys and young girls are organizing. I tell you, when next you visit, you see how much these people are saying, we need a credible party. We're waiting. You people must talk and unite. We need a party that can sack the APC. And even the old goons, the political class, you can attest to the fact that they're all meeting. Kwakwanso has come down from his high horse. El-Rufai is jumping around. Atiku Abubakar is moving around. Peter Gregory is moving around. Several political leaders are beginning to talk. And people are saying we must put away our individualistic thoughts and ambition and unite to rescue and redeem our country. So I haven't lost faith in our country. I think that going forward, our people will coalesce at that palace, where the palace ideals that kept our people down will be defeated, and truth raised up as the beacon light of hope. And that truth is the fact that when the people are united, when the people are organized, no forces of wickedness can subdue them. I see hope. I see a new Nigeria on the horizon, and I see a new republic.
Thank you very much, Prof. This is indeed a very fine place to anchor this conversation. Professor Chris Nwaokobia Jnr., a political analyst, a lawyer, an activist, and a public affairs commentator. Prof, always a joy to listen to you, to have these conversations with you. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. God bless Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Bye.